This is the problem with Google, is you only find what you're looking for.
Welcome to Classical Etc. You're in the studio with Memoria Press.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Jessica Gardner, and today I'm joined by Martin, Tanya, and Paul. And we are recording this at the end of May. It's one of the last weeks of school here on campus, and we know that for many homeschool families and families in traditional schools, they are in the home stretch of classes for the year. So that is today's topic. What to do in those summer months. So we've got a lot to cover. I think it's going to be a great discussion. Yeah. But before we get into it, what we're reading, Paul, you've got so much variety going on with the books you're reading.
I keep dropping books before I finish them, but this morning I thought Jess is going to ask me this question. So what do I have in my Audible? And I had the Rudyard Kipling collection. So I turned that on. The Man That Would Be King, I think, was the first one. The narrator wasn't great, but like I listened to it for a half hour on my way in, and then when I wasn't being really thrilled by the narrator, but right at the tail end of whatever the story was of that 30 minutes, I was like, okay, like I'm caught by the story. So
really?
We'll yeah. I haven't read Kipling.
I haven't liked the Kipling I've read, but I haven't read a lot of Kipling, so I don't want to judge.
Oh yeah. This is like 40 hours of Kipling books, like Jungle Book, Jungle Book 2, Kim, I remember reading Kim as a kid, but I don't remember liking it or disliking it.
I think my kids liked the Jungle Book when I read it to them.
Oh, I think the Jungle Book is a children's classic. I really do. I mean, in fact, I like the Jungle Book stories better than anything else he wrote.
Yeah, well, and I'm hoping
there's a reason they're the most famous, I suppose.
Oh,
probably. But I'm hoping that the narrator changes between books.
Oh, yeah, it's probably not going to happen.
It's I
hate it when you get a bad narrator.
Yeah,
it's better not to read it than to read it.
That's
with
right.
a bad
Than to read it with a bad narrator.
Right.
Yeah. Tanya, Middlemarch?
I'm not reading anything.
Oh, so does that mean you're done?
It does. I finished Middlemarch this morning.
Wow. Okay.
And I finished on my commute yesterday. I finished A Gentleman in Moscow. I'm literally in between everything, but I'm going to pick up. Carol Reynolds gave me a book when she was here that she finished in her hotel room. And it's called The Bishop's Mantle. And it's by some obscure author that I've never heard of, but she'd really enjoyed it. So I'm going to, I think, pick that up and read it next. And then people have been recommending to me a book called A Covenant of Water. I've heard so many people tell me how wonderful it is. So I ordered it based on their recommendations, knowing nothing about it. And I can't remember who wrote it. But
fiction?
It's this fact. I mean, it is as big as War and Peace.
Oh, goodness. Is it fiction?
It is fiction, but I really don't. I mean, I literally just bought it because so many people that I respect said it was a great book. So I'm not recommending it.
Right.
But we'll see. But first I'm going to read this book Carol gave me because it looks like, she said, it's just a light read. She just found it at a used bookstore and picked it up. I think it was written in the 40s. So I don't know. So right now I'm not reading anything, and I don't know about Audible next. I thought about doing Rules of Civility. But it's a different narrator. And that Gentleman in Moscow narrator was just one of the best I've ever heard. I should just look up other things he's narrated.
I listened to that. I'm trying to remember who that was.
He was so good. I can't remember his name.
Now, Tanya, you re-listen to all these podcasts in your car.
Yes.
And I'm kind of shocked that you have time for Audible, because I figured that once you listen to the one that we're about to publish, you'd go back to the beginning and start re-listening to all our podcasts.
Right.
Just so you can hear our voices,
So I listen to them in the same way that I look at all the books before they go to the printer for the first time, all the new books, just like I am that last look. And so anything that's not perfect really comes down to me. So it's been through the copy editor, it's been through the all the authors, it's been through everybody else, and it is literally ready to go when I look at it. And the same thing with the podcast. It should be ready to go. And sometimes I think, well, this one was not all that great, but it goes anyway. But it does make me ultimately responsible for any errors. So it's not really a good thing.
Yeah, I thought you would, though, enjoy us so
just
much.
The sound of your
that
voice
beyond,
in my car.
Beyond checking before it goes out, you'd go back and just enjoy Martin and I talking.
That hasn't happened. Not to say that you're not in my head all the time talking. So I do feel like I carry you with me.
That's
well, now that I know that, there's some things I'm going to say.
I'm sure there are. You go right. I feel like I've already heard them all.
Come up with something new.
Okay, well, good luck.
That would be a challenge, I believe.
Tanya, this is Martin.
That's right. I wake up in the middle of the night sometimes. I think Martin's talking to me. It's like in Jane Eyre when she hears Rochester from miles away calling to her in his need, and then Rochester says, there was one day when I was just desperate and I was just calling for you." And she was like, "I heard it." That's going to be you and me, Martin.
Yeah, I'm going to make an app out of it.
Oh, Martin's musings.
Oh gosh.
Martin, what are you reading?
I probably mentioned this in the previous show, but there's one for my introduction to classical education class, or one of our college summer courses, which are open for enrollment now at Memoria College.
.org.
There's a book I try to read a new classical education book every year before that class, and this year it's The Classical Tradition by Gilbert Hyatt, who's famous for having translated the Paideia series by Werner Jaeger, which in itself was a great literary achievement. And so I'm on and basically it's about what happened after the classical period to the study of the classics, all from early on all the way to the present, which in his case was 1949 when he wrote the book. And so the last chapter I was reading was just talking about how he said someone could learn all there was to know about the classics by the middle of the 19th century. But after that, it was impossible, because he talked about all the stuff that came out. They found new things. They found new papyri. They a lot of things came to light that they just didn't know about before. Excavations and all that sort of thing. And then there was this furious study of the classics and papers that came, journals and new books and all these things. And it became so complicated that you could no longer know it all. And he talked about the difficulties of that. And it made me think one of the things I want to talk about in class this year is, what do we need to take from all there's so much out there to know about the classics, so many classical authors. What is the essential thing as classical educators that we need to know out of all that just ocean of knowledge that we have about it now?
So what is it?
I don't know. I'm going to figure it out.
You can call me.
I mean, just to, the stories, we have, it's not anything different from what Memoria Press is doing. It's real. That's really what it is that we need to know.
But we do, somehow we've got to figure out how our seniors then recognize the culmination of it all and put it together in a way that does send them off knowing this is why you've been doing this all these years. And I feel like we haven't done a very good job of that. Yeah. And maybe it's because we haven't figured it out yet.
Well, no, and I just literally read that yesterday. So I was just thinking last night, I'm going to need to set that stuff forth. What is it what is, I even need to think of a name for it. What is that core type of stuff?
Well, I think you all said it. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, like, whatever that body of knowledge was up until the middle of the 19th century, like that evidently is probably the most important stuff because it's what was passed down from generation to generation.
Right.
And so it would be interesting to have, that body of knowledge compiled and say, this is what everybody needs to take with them.
This is what they knew before we knew everything.
Yeah.
And we still don't know everything, but there's just so much information out there. There's so many authors. And I think about, here I am, I've been talking about classical education for years, but there's still many classical authors I have not read. Nobody can know all of it, and you just have to make your choice. You can either specialize in some particular aspect of it, which is not really, I think, what we want to do. We want to be generalists in this. We want to take the ideas and the values that are good from it. And so it's a process of sifting and extracting and all that and then presenting it to a new generation.
I think you all, when you did the podcast recently with Mitchell, which I thoroughly enjoyed, I think you got near it then.
Your favorite episode was one that
I wasn't
here.
in. That is correct. But also one of my least favorite episodes was one in which I was not here also. So we can talk about that one if you'd rather.
That one also had Mitchell in it.
That one also had Mitchell. But on this one, you all were talking about that classical education teaches you what it is to be human. And so I think that somehow we've got to then put that very abstract concept into practical terms that show students this is what you've done. This is, in all of these years, this is how you've learned to be human. So you can thank me. You can thank me later when.
That idea.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. When you figure this out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Some big tasks ahead.
You got to figure it out. When are you teaching it?
About 3 weeks.
Okay. Well,
You got it.
It's gonna be.
Gonna get a lot of Martin's musings in between now and then.
Yeah.
Oh, well, today's topic, the summer months. I imagine that some of our listeners are so excited that summer is around the corner, and some of them might be thinking, what am I going to do with the time? So, a question to all of you. There are a bunch of different approaches for summer activities, how you fill the time. What do you think? Is it for academics? Is it for review? Is it for learning new things? Is it rest? What?
I think I don't think it's necessarily for learning new things. I definitely think it's for rest. And I do think review is important. And it's something that I failed to do well with my children because I had really great intentions. But we tended to rest more than anything and visit, we visited some local historical places. I took them to DC a couple of times, some things that would be hands-on because we don't do projects or really hands-on things during the school year. There's no time. So I feel like summer is a great time for that. But I do think also my children would have benefited from penmanship practice, from math practice, from Latin vocabulary review. I do think those things really would help them to be more solid students in the fall and less wasted time. But oh well, it didn't happen. But we went to Daniel Boone's birthplace.
Well, no, when you said that, because that's exactly, we were talking about this at some family gathering the other night about how, for one thing, academics, you're trying to teach them a lot of different things, but you got to be careful about being too narrow. That there's that whole, sort of, what do you call it? This idea that people can be too bookish and just sit there in their room all day and read. And there's some kids who actually like to do that.
That's true.
And I think you need to get them. You need to get out and you need to do some things. And what we were talking about was seeing, like, I've only seen one or two of our state parks here in Kentucky, which are really nice.
Yeah.
We need to get out. Yeah. We need to take a family trip, and we need to see Big Bone Lick, and we need to. I'd like to see Kingdom Come State Park, which was based on a great book by John Fox Jr., great Kentucky author. There's all kinds of. There's an old growth forest in eastern Kentucky. Apparently, it's never been logged. I want to see that. I want to see what the trees would have been like if we hadn't logged everything. And the national parks, I mean, there's so much of that out there, and just take a break from the books, go out and see real stuff.
And you really.
And museums too.
Museums, yes. And you really do, you do need rest. You do need a break. And it's very rejuvenating. I mean, I feel like I'm a much better employee on Monday morning than I am on Friday afternoon. And I think it's the same thing for students. They need a break, and parents need a break if they're homeschooling, and teachers in brick and mortar schools need a break. And then by the middle of the summer, they're excited to think about. At the beginning of the summer, they're relieved that it's over. But by the middle, they're starting to get excited again about coming back and teaching again.
One of the things I'm excited for with the two girls in our house, now that we don't have to get up at 6:30 to get to school, is taking them out to see the fireflies. Because out in the pasture, I mean, but you have to wait till it's really dark to get the amazing experience. But I'm not keeping them up that late on a school night or even on a weekend of a school night. No, because it's just going to create too much havoc.
That's right.
And so, I mean, just things like that.
Oh, I've loved that more loose environment in the summer when nobody really had to get up at a certain time, and they could get up and do whatever they wanted to. It was a wonderful break.
Yeah.
I forgot about the fireflies. They should be coming up here.
They're coming up real soon.
Yeah, I grew up in California, so we didn't even, but my grandmother lived in South Carolina, and so we would come out to South Carolina, and I remember seeing fireflies, and I just thought they were so utterly magical.
They are magical.
My wife is the same way, and particularly we have 2 2-year-old grandkids, and this will be their first time really seeing it and appreciating it, and we're looking forward to that as soon as they come out.
And what I was reflecting on this because I remember being a kid and having fireflies in the backyard, but then when I was an adult and you go out in the back, you just don't see them anymore because everybody's fumigating for mosquitoes and all this kind of stuff. And then when we moved out to the Shelby County, and it was when we finally had 17 acres of pasture, and we'd go out at night to collect the chicken eggs and stuff. And then it caught us by surprise, I think. And now that we've expanded the pasture even more this year, I'm excited to see just the expanse of it.
Right. Yeah, because I don't really have them in my yard much anymore. And when I was growing up, and when we lived in Newcastle, my yard was full of them, but it backed to a farm.
Well, but then if it's a crop farm and they come through and
it was a cow farm.
See, the cow farms, you'll have them.
Yes.
The crop farms, and that's what we noticed is like our field where our cows were, we'd have them everywhere. But then the next field right over where they'd spray for crops, they'd be there, and then they'd come through to spray to kill the vegetation, and then they're gone. Yeah, that's
really sad. I mean, it's nice for the crops that your vegetables survived, but
if you want to bring your 2-year-old grandkids out to see it on an expanse.
Yeah, well, we had that when we lived out in the country.
Right now, you've moved to the big city.
Now we moved to the big city. Gosh, I hope we see the fireflies too.
Right, there aren't as many in the big city. And I'm in the same town as Paul, but not out. I'm in the city. And so it does make a difference not to be.
Yeah.
But hopefully they don't need many.
So next thing on the list is fireflies.
Yes. And catch them, put them in a jar, kill them, suffocate them. I mean, it's not the intent, but that's what every kid does, right? You put them in there the next morning, they've suffocated.
And watch them light up.
Yeah.
And then they're dead.
Take their lighter part. I remember as a kid taking the little lighter part off.
Oh, I did.
And
made little rings.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, you make rings
Really?
with them. Yeah, they lit
Oh
up.
no,
They
I've never
stay-
done
yeah.
that.
Lots of mean things little kids do. But it's
All in the name of exploring
Maybe your
and wonder.
grandchildren will just enjoy.
I think we're going to try to enjoy
Yes.
say, don't kill the
Don't
fireflies.
kill the fireflies.
Kids are mean.
Yeah, kids are mean, but it was so fun.
You still seem to be taking joy from this.
Well, see, I would never suggest to a child that they do that.
Okay, don't.
But if the child does it, I might just let them do it.
I didn't know this about him.
No, I didn't either.
Jess over here, she was enjoying it too. I mean,
Yes.
you know.
Martin, you've said before often about, I know we talk about how we don't just develop the academic mind of a student. There's so much to be gained in developing and growing in wonder and exploration. It sounds like kind of what you're saying is summer is partly for that.
Yeah. And, when we did live out in the country up until just recently, we had a creek that ran through the back.
Mm-hmm.
And my boys, I had 3 boys and a girl, my boys would just disappear for half a day or more.
Yeah.
And they would be I don't know where they went, because it was a fairly wide creek, 3 to 6 inches of water just when it's running normally, and then more than that when it rains. And my one son in particular, he knew everything. He knew about all the life forms on that creek. And it wasn't because I told him to go out there and find them. They just did it. I'd walk down there with, he says, "You want to see where the leeches are? I'll show you where the leeches are." And then he would show me this, and okay, there's crawdads here. Now watch this. That if you can get a child to know things and love them in the way that my son loved nature, and my other kids did too, but he's always sort of been that way. And he just had this natural wonder. Now they have a 2-year-old, and he's got that same attitude about life. It's really great to see.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and of course, some people can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Some people live in places where that's hard to do, and you have to make an effort to go out and find those places. We lived in a suburb in Southern California, is where I grew up. But my dad took us camping at least every other week. I mean, we did so much camping, and we saw so much. California is if you get out of the suburbs, it's got a lot
lush.
It's
lush.
The mountains, the
And quite
sequoias.
diverse.
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
Quite diverse.
And very diverse. I mean, you could go out.
Yeah.
We will go out to Palm Desert.
Mm-hmm.
There was one day when my parents wanted to look at some property in Palm Desert, so we left. We went to Palm Desert. They looked at some property. I had to sit in the car for a while, boring. And then we went back. And when we went back, we drove near some of the mountains, and it was early spring, and there was snow. We got out and we had a snowball fight.
Oh,
And then we drove down, and my dad went toward the coast, and we drove down the beach. We stopped. We played in the water at the beach, and then we came home. I mean, there's not very many places where you can do that.
that's right.
Oh, but and my dad, and this was before all the electronics and all this stuff, and people wanted to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's free. What
And
you
it
did
it's
was
all free. It's all free. Yeah, there's so
it's
many
not like
things.
you have to go. You don't have to go on a big vacation to explore. It's so great for children to explore the world they live in, the immediate world that they live in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's nice if you can do other things too, but that's really enough for them.
And kids will remember that. I can still smell the campgrounds in Kings Canyon National Park.
Mm-hmm.
I can the pine and the sequoias, and just the smell of the camp and people burning fires, and I can still smell that today. And I'm thinking I really need to take my grandkids out camping, but see, we didn't do that. We did soccer, and I will say this. My wife says this today, that she would have far preferred that we had not done that, even though my son went to college on a soccer scholarship, and we had gone camping. because we went camping once. It was with Andrew Kern at the Searcy Institute.
Oh my God.
It rained the whole time. It was a complete disaster. And my kids, I mentioned camping, and this is what they remember is that one.
That's right.
Yes. And Andrew knows that what it did to my family. And he always says, "Hey, Martin, you want to go camping again?" No, I don't.
But talking about letting kids explore their surroundings, like a few weekends ago, the girls found a frog by the deck. I mean, they spent the entire afternoon with that frog.
Yes.
And just to have the time to do that, they tried to make it a little habitat. They probably, almost drowned it. But they were doing their best to take care of it, trying to, and
learning.
Yeah. And made sure that I checked on it after they went to bed. That kind of stuff is perfect for what summer's for. Also, another thing I want to mention is summer tends to be the time that you have like outdoor events, musical performances that are outdoor community things.
Shakespeare in the park.
I mean, all that kind of stuff it gives a way for kids, like especially if it's outdoors, the kids can still run around, stop, watch it for a little while, run around, and gives them a way to enter into it without it feeling like a really stuffy, I have to come into a building and sit for 2 hours and watch this performance.
Yeah.
And they can sit there and play in the grass while it's, happening.
That's right.
All that kind of stuff. I mean, that happens in summer, does not tend to happen in winter.
Yeah. And of course, we're living in Kentucky, and where the summer and the winter is very different.
Right.
Because some people live on a place like California, you don't have the seasons.
Right?
It's year round. And so I think it also depends just on where you live.
What you can do.
What you can do. Because some of the stuff you can do year round in some places, and other places like Kentucky, it's cold in the winter. You can't do that. So summer is the only time weather-wise you could do something.
I think also summers for me, looking back, are, times when I would read whatever I wanted to read. That also is school. In school, you have to read so much. And so but just to be released from that and to be able to read whatever you want to, I found to be very freeing and nice.
Well, and I've talked about this before. I'm working on an article called "In Praise of," or maybe I've done this before. I'm expanding it. In praise of accidental knowledge, because the reason that we don't read as much anymore is because we no longer have boredom. Even in the summer, particularly really in the summers, you didn't have school, and your friends weren't over all the time. There wasn't always anybody around, and you got bored. You needed something to do, and so you didn't have video games.
You didn't have video games.
Have
a lot of TV.
Yeah, this is gone, unfortunately. But I read the World Book 1968 World Book Encyclopedia. I read the Illustrated History, the Reader's Digest Illustrated History of World War II. I think I read it several times. we read because we were bored, and we read whatever we had, and particularly the encyclopedia was great because you found things you weren't looking for. This is the problem with Google: is you only find what you're looking for, and so. You when you have an encyclopedia, you want to look up Australia, but you got to pass by Aardvark. Well, you got to read that, and whatever else is in between. And you read 13 things
by the time you got to
Australia, and so you learned all this stuff, just general knowledge.
But that's also a reason why you should be careful about what books enter your home. Right.
True, yeah,
because if you are able to cultivate that in your children and keep them away from whatever, from the inordinate amount of times on video games or TV or whatever, and they do get bored and they go pick up something on the shelf, you want that to be something that's going to be good for them.
That's right. And you really have to watch that now. You can't just go to the library anymore and turn children loose like I used to do. You just can't do it.
Yeah.
You actually have to go to the library children's section and curate the books that your children can look at and read.
I also want to say one of the desires that I intend to do this summer in some way, shape, or form, it may be getting my mother over twice a week or whatever, but just continue. Like one of the children we have is behind at a kindergarten level, and just using the summer as an opportunity for slow catch up.
Yes.
So we're not going to do anything overwhelming. We're not going to be doing this every single morning, but 2 or 3 mornings a week, for an hour, sit down, let's work on this stuff, because she's fatigued, right? She's fatigued right now. She needs some rest. But it is an opportunity for us to try to catch her up a little bit to her peers.
Which would be so nice for her in the fall. That she could go back to school a more confident reader would be everything.
Yeah.
But you're right, do it so that it doesn't feel like a chore. Right. And if that's all she has to do. And I think that's a good point, is that if you do have a student that is behind in some major one area, just concentrate on that.
There's a balance, or you're saying there's a difference between brand new material for the goal of, accelerating their year ahead or whatever the goal might be, compared to preparing them for what's ahead that they might be behind on or review.
Yeah, it's a great time to be able to shore those things up.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of books in our curriculum, but still, they don't have time, if they're doing our curriculum, to read a whole lot outside that. And so summer, we've got the longer list of books, and so summer is a great time to tackle that stuff.
Well, and
I have time during the year.
I spent, I don't know how many summers reading those great illustrated classics.
I loved those
and
as a kid.
those one summer, I think I read every library copy of all those biographies for children of American, and we sell a few now that are redone. But when I read them, they were hardbacks, and I'd go to the library and get a couple, and then go get it. I would read. I think I read the whole shelf of them in a summer. So there still are really good things out there, but I think you have to look for them harder than when I was.
Well,
a
and
child.
one of our articles in the new Meliora journal that Memorial College puts out, that's just coming out, is by Tracy Lee Simmons, and he talks about going in the grocery store with his mother, and the American Heritage had these books on the presidents, and I forget how many volumes there were several presidents per volume, and he wanted one of those, and his mother said, she's thinking, I'm going to get it to him, he's not going to read it, and he wanted the set. She said, well, I'll buy you one if you finish it, then I'll buy you the next one. And that was exactly my experience. I remember going with my mother in the grocery store, and those American Heritage books on the presidents, and they had good illustrations, but not too many, and they were wonderfully written. And he talks about what that did for him. It's those kind of.
Did your mother only buy you one?
Well, I don't think we ever got the complete set. I don't think we ever had the complete set. And if I find one, I'm going to buy the whole set.
Oh yeah,
for the grandkids. But
Well, yeah, I remember having a book as a kid that was like, it was just a book of questions. It could be like, how do spiders make their webs? And it was just a random, concoction of stuff. But I loved sitting there and reading that. I would get bored. I said, go and pull that out.
And did you go through the stage, and I think every 12-year-old boy in my generation went through the stage, like 12 years old, and you would sit there with the Guinness Book of World Records.
Yes.
And you would read, and you would spend hours in the Guinness Book of World Records.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's like 12-year-old boys, and my boys the same way, 12 years old, and they're just sitting there with the Guinness Book.
And I can do that. That's what's going through your head.
Yes.
Which of these records can I break?
Longest fingernails. There's always weird stuff.
And I still remember that one of the most vivid memories of my childhood was the one. I don't know why this is a record, but the one of the lady, and she's got this big bruise on her abdomen, and it's from a meteor that came down. And I think, okay, I'm laying there, 12-year-old, in my bedroom, wondering what's going to that night. I mean,
So the world record was that she was hit by the
that
biggest
can happen,
meteor.
nothing is certain, you know.
Well, the one I remember was the guy who had the most tattoos on his body.
Oh, I remember him.
And I was like, what? I just couldn't even fathom that.
Or the Indian guy who grew the longest fingernails in the world.
That's what I remember. Oh. Wow.
So there's an option too.
Okay, no.
Summers are memorable for everyone.
Yes. So, but Jessica, the online academy has enrichment.
We
right?
do.
Like
We do.
literature enrichment. So if somebody
do.
wants, it's kind of like a book club.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way to put
Or
it.
like 5 weeks or something.
We do. We have grade ranges. So for the little ones, we have things like the James Herriot Treasury for Children, which is so popular because it's so good. All the animals in the farm.
Right.
That's really popular. This year we're doing Winnie the Pooh, 21 balloons. And then for the older
so that
kids,
would
we
be
have all
fun
kinds of things.
too.
It is. It's a really great entree too into testing out how you feel about online classes because it's really low commitment.
Right.
You know, they just go and they read the books together. It's wonderful. We also offer review. So Latin review, math review, grammar.
Which that would have been good for me because I didn't follow through. But if I'd actually paid for a class, I probably would have made sure my kids did it.
Yeah. And there are other things too. We have a lot of good classical studies that are just different from what we can offer in the normal course of the program throughout the year.
And I hear that Mitchell and Paul are teaching a class on personal finance.
They
We are, but it's full.
It's very
Oh,
full.
wow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know. Mitchell hasn't come banging down my door to do a second section, so I don't know that we've how many are on the wait list, but we also have adult classes as well. And so if as an adult you're like, hey, I have some time on my hands, I want to get ahead on understanding Latin so that I'm ready to help my child this year. And we have occasional, like we have like a second form intensive. So if you started first form in 8th grade and you're like, I want to get further by the end of high school, you could do second form over the summer, but we don't do a lot of that because that, we do intend it to be, more light, more restful classes
right
in the summer.
But I do think summer is a really good time. When I was teaching, I feel like I really took advantage of summers, not to have to be lesson planning anymore, but to actually read more books that would be applicable to the students that I was teaching or applicable to the history that I was teaching, just out of interest. I was interested in them, but also I felt like it would help me be a better teacher. And so that's a really good time, because I'm a huge lover of the sun. It's my main vice. And so, just to sit in the sun and read a book without the pressure of thinking I've got to teach this tomorrow was very relaxing and nice, but it was also serving a purpose. So I do think it's a good time for adults to continue their education where you just can't get it done during the school year. You're wiped out and it's a lot to teach those children. And I think your classes are intended for that reason in the summer, right? Are they hard? Do they require
there's
tests?
some reading. No, it does require, writing a paper if you take it for credit, but you can also take it not for credit
And just
enjoy the
edify
discussions.
your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's good adult choices at the college and at the academy.
Yeah. So lots to do.
Tanya, what would you say to a family who says, but I just want to get ahead? We have the time in the summer. I want to get ahead. I want to get the literature set. I want to start reading now. I want to get ahead with math. I want to go through the first couple units just so we can. What would you say to people who don't need the catch up, but they really want to get ahead?
Are anxious, and people are. They get anxious, but there's so much time. I would say, ideally, for the teacher to get ahead and read all the stuff for the next year, I think that's huge and a great value and would make your school year better. But to push the students to do that, there is no reason. There is just not a rush. And I mean, that's the whole thing about classical education is we're immersing ourselves and spending the time, reading fewer books, but spending a lot of time in them. And so I I think, summer, then should continue that on. I mean, if you want to have a book that everybody reads together, like Heidi or something, that would be a really great book that would, I can't think of, because it's the outdoors and nature is so important in Heidi. I think it would be a really great family read aloud. And we did some of that in the summer where I would just pick a book that wasn't in the curriculum. And we would read it together, and we would sit on the porch outside and I would read to them. And I think that's valuable, but I wouldn't move forward in the curriculum just to get ahead.
Well, but people do have, so I mean, because year-round schooling is a thing. Some people have that mentality rather than taking a 3-month break, because the 3-month break is,
It's a lot.
And so, I mean, I have heard of families that, just when they finish, whatever, if it takes them, we plan 34 weeks, if it takes them 30 weeks, takes them 40 weeks, whatever it is, they may take a week or two off and then they, go back to it. But then that also gives them a chance that when we plan 34 weeks, if they want to take a break between week 11 and 12, for a couple of weeks, they can do that without, the pressure of, what are we going to do? So
yes, especially if there's a new baby coming in the family, or there's a surgery coming up, or a big vacation. Maybe one of the parents has a business trip in another country and they want to take the whole family. Absolutely. But that's different because you're still just getting your 34 weeks of school in. You're just choosing to do it in a more flexible way, which is a great reason to homeschool. But to push ahead and do that 34 weeks and then move on to the next 34 weeks, I just think everybody needs a break and a rest. And there are other things you can do that your students will still be learning without moving into the next year's curriculum. But I do think the year-round school is not a bad idea. At first, when it started coming into the public schools, I just thought, I just don't know what I feel about this, not to have that summer break. But I do think that taking the year-round students do get to take a lot more regular breaks.
They do. It's less of a sprint and it's more of a marathon that's slower because you've got built-in breaks all throughout. So, that would completely change the conversation of like, what do you do in that 3 weeks to a month? Well, I mean, you're probably going to prioritize whatever your vacation is going to be and that kind of thing. But you're going to have more breaks throughout the year where there's less people out doing those things. And
That's true.
It's quieter. It's easier to get into the museums, all that kind of stuff because you're doing that
while everybody else is in school.
But the principle still applies that you're honoring the rightful place of rest and enriching other aspects of learning and growing as a child.
Balance.
Right. That's right.
It's all about balance.
So it's applied either way.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other summer advice that we've left out?
Just have fun.
Don't get sunburned.
Have fun. Don't get sunburned.
Sunscreen.
Use sunscreen.
Martin, anything else?
No, I've given away all my wisdom on this.
Martin's going camping.
The rest of it's on his
with his
app.
Grandchildren.
Start in the backyard.
That's good.
I'm going to sit out on my front porch.
Absolutely, in the backyard is the best way to camp.
I got a great front porch. I'm going to sit out there this afternoon maybe and read the Guinness Book of World Records.
Just revisit that. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us. We will be back next time, and you can find any of our books that we've mentioned, Heidi, or the other summer enrichment classes or books at memoriapress.com. Thanks for joining us today on Classical Etc. by Memoria Press. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, or share this episode or comment. We love to hear your questions and your comments. If you want to learn more about Memoria Press, please go to memoriapress.com. This has been Classical Etc. We're so glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.